GG, I am DJ John Tavall, Nelly Nell, Chris Ryder. We are Dinner at the Round Table Podcast, your source to knowledge. Today's a special segment. I briefly spoke about it in my last segment, and I want to talk about the term black. Before I begin, I want to just, kind of refresh our memories for our listeners and viewers. We had an episode last year entitled Are Latinos Black or White? And I really came to the conclusion that it's going to be above. And I'm going to explain why. Thinking about the term black, right? Let's begin. First of all, let's go like this, all right? When you think about the terms Negro or Negro, black, colored, African American, American descendants, all these terms are just labels. They do not represent human beings. They're all man-made labels. And, and this goes, to the story of human evolution, going back 7 million years ago, which is totally a different podcast episode. Because again, though, when you call yourself these labels, they're all man-made, okay? At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We are one species. The labeling of, African people started with the Portuguese and the Spaniards, where they called African people negro, which in English means black. So as I stated before in my last segment, the Europeans, this was a very strategic move by the Europeans, because they used that label purposely to devalue African people. Because think about the word black. Black is a word that has been historically used in conjunction with words that have a negative connotation. It was a label invented by Europeans, or the so-called whites, if you want to call them, to turn men into mere commodities. Because remember, the African people were viewed as property. They were not viewed as human beings. So the term black definitely leads to a very psychological, legal, and spiritual issue. And again, when you think about the term black, it has a very negative connotation. For example, let me start with blacklisted, black plague, black magic, black market, black mood, when you get blackballed, blackmail. The list goes on. Even like phrases of, the blackest day of the war, which means, it's a very tragic day. And then, even when you black out, that means when you black out, that means you lose consciousness. These are little things that we must really pay attention to. We cannot disregard that. And then, when someone dies, you go to a funeral, what do you wear? All black. So again, and when you think about even digging deeper in science terms, black means death. So, we got to really start dissecting this word and really understand the historical background of why Europeans, purposely put this label on African people. And also the Native Americans as well. When we start to really dive into this, think about also the word color, right? Now, color means anything that has been painted, stained or, dyed. But are humans painted? Are we stained? If not, why we call each other, or call other humans colored people? Because man is made of the image of God. So again, we start to really dissect this and start to really, take a nice grasp of this information and, start assessing this. And the term black really, it was used by prejudiced people, again, to really devalue Africans. Because black was a negative word way before they applied it to the people of Africa. So that was already a word already established. This word came about, when they first brought the Africans here to, what they call the New World, that word has always had a negative connotation. So, like, take note, when you think about the word black, the definition, it's an adjective. It's not even a noun, it's an adjective. And, by its core definition, if you call yourself black, in actuality, you're really reducing yourself to your pigment, and you're not looking at yourself in the context of a larger history, of your people, your ancestors. So, I got no problem with people that, identify themselves as, as a person that comes from an African ancestry, because to me that makes sense. Because you really, you're getting more in detail as far as like who you are, who you really identify with. But when you label yourself as a color, you're really calling yourself a thing, because at the end of the day, that's what was purposely put, to make you looked upon as a thing. So, again, think about this term. Now, the Europeans, what they did was they basically made themselves to be labeled white. Because again, no one in Europe called each other white. No one in Africa called each other black. This term came about, when the Europeans started their voyage and started to really, conquer the lands in the Western Hemisphere. So they really, they did this purposely. And when you think about it, what's the opposite of white? Black. So in other words, Africans are the opposite. They're trying to, that's what they're implying. You're the opposite of us. You're black, we are white. And this was not accidental. This is, again, was purposely done. And again, black is not a complexion. It's about class and status. And when you think about black, it has no nationality. It doesn't represent a group of people from a particular geographic setting. In fact, black people, you want to, quote unquote, are the only group of people in the United States that are designated racially opposed to geographically. And that's just a fact. That's just a fact. And the value of not identifying, with black, it compels to more in detail. And, you're not really identifying with your culture, knowing your geographic origin, knowing your history. So the question I bring up is, why did the European, again, decided to label themselves white? And this is, again, it goes with the origin of words, of the meaning, the connotations. And white means purity. And purity means God. And God means ruler of land. Okay? To break it down even further, purity is defined as lack of guilt or evil thoughts. The quality or state of being pure. If you really break it down by its definition. So this labeling was designed. This is basically was designed, to feel more superior. Because when you think of the word white, like these words, these like this is done in a way to really, this is basically like this is all European psychology in actuality. And KRS One said it best. He said it one time, and it's one of his speakings. He said, there is no such thing as a white person. Like no one. I have never seen a human being this complexion. Never in my life ever seen a human being this complexion that is white. It is a colonial indoctrination. That's what it is. And bought into it. And it's a myth. It is a myth. It's a myth, and we need to really reframe ourselves to really call each other a certain term that's been historically put in place to look upon us as a certain way. And then when you think about when you call yourself white, it goes against science and just common sense, because no one is scientifically, again, white or black. You know, like I never seen a black person this black. I never seen a white person this white. So, you know, it's a contradiction to reality when you really start to really dive in and start to think about it. And I was doing some research, and this is kind of the funny thing, you know, how they classify race. So according to the U.S. Office of Management and Budget, in October 30th, 1997, the way to define white, check this out, is a person having origin of any of the original people from Europe, North Africa, or Middle East. So let's stop here. Okay, this is something that you guys could definitely do your own research and really assess this on your own. So first of all, look at one term that definitely caught my attention and pretty much caught, I'm assuming it caught your attention. It said North Africa. So what they're implying, if you are from, say for instance, Egypt, Libya, Sudan, you're considered to be white by the definition is how they classify a race. So this is something you start to really think about. You start to really think about this. And I mean, you know, it's just like, you know, when you really start to dive into this and really understand the history of these terms and the reasons behind these terms, you start to really open up your mind more. And the way they got blacks or African Americans defined is a person having origin in any of the black racial group in Africa. Now, let's just stop here. Okay, I'm gonna say this definition one more time. The way it's classified race, right? The way it's defined, if you're black or African American, is a person having origin in any of the black racial groups in Africa. Now, think about this right now. I mean, when I first read this definition, I started to, to scratch my head, and I said to myself, how do you define a word by using the word itself in the definition? Because again, black, the way it's defined, is a person having origin in any of the black racial groups in Africa. That doesn't make any sense. You know, so this definitely raises a lot of questions when you start to really think about this. And, you know, again, you know, these are not complexions. You know, really, when you think about the term white, it's about power. You know, it's about power. You know, when you call a white person white, okay, you really indirectly give them power by its definition of what white means. You know, and this is why the Europeans decided to call themselves white, because it's meant to affirm and empower. So, you know, white really, you know, implies, you know, divine and, you know, spiritual authority, you know, to have that, you know, authority. So, you know, you really start to think about this.
But why do you use a phrase like black is beautiful?
Because black is commonly associated with negatives. The black market, the black sheep of the family, anything which is supposed to be bad.
Then why do you use the word? Why call yourselves black? I mean, you people are more brown than black.
Why do you call yourselves white? You people are more pink than white.
Precisely.
Yeah, so the clip you just watched right now was a movie, Cry Freedom, you know. It was a movie about Steve Biko, who was played by Denzel Washington. And, you know, as you can see in the movie, it definitely makes you think. So, you know, when Denzel asks, you know, so why do you call yourself white? You are more pink than white. And the judge replies, precisely. So that should sink in right now. Let that sink in. You know, when he replied precisely. So, you know, why would the Europeans want to label themselves to be called pink? Because it has no power. It has no term white. It's very powerful. It's more powerful to use than to use the term pink. You know, again, this is all European psychology that's being used through our history. So it's very important to really understand the origin of words. When you think about basically, the synonyms of black, it relates to missing, unavailable, blooming, miserable, very sad. So again, these terms are not about complexion. It's about devaluing Africans. So, because again, as I stated already, no one in Africa labeled, they called each other black, just as the Europeans. They never called each other white. All this idea came about when they started to really conquer, places around the world. And, so my question is always, what I ask people now, as I learn more about this, why do we accept this adjective that, when it's associated with so much negativity, when it's really associated with words such as, death, being, misery, dirty, gloomy, wicked, tragic. So why we want to accept this adjective, of accepting this term, that was put upon us? We didn't give this label to ourselves. It was given to us, just as our last names were given to us. Really think about it and really dissect this and really just make your own assessment, so you could draw your own conclusion with this. But I'm here to really, share the information and just really make people, think and really see things from a different lens. And when you think about this, right, when you think about black, and especially with the police brutality, we have to understand the history, because again, just being labeled black already has a negative connotation. So now when you have a negative connotation behind your label, and then you start to mirror that definition by your behavior, it gives more justification to use that label. And when you think about historically about, how the people of Africa, were treated even after slavery. We're talking about, the Black Code. We're talking about the Jim Crows. We're talking about convict leasing. And this is why when you use the word, when you think about this, right? Because words are very powerful, extremely powerful, and I'll say this. This is why, purposely, even, when you know the history, and, again, as has already stated, having already a negative connotation, but because of the impact it had on people that were labeled black, and how it was just, they were so oppressed. And even after they were, like I said, after, slavery was abolished, they were still going through the struggle, which results many people to do things that, they had to survive. And, when you think about TV, they portray people that label black as these evil people. I remember watching Cops as a kid, and it was just always, seeing police officers going after, a black person. And it's like sends a message, though, as if those are the bad guys. Those are the evil people, and that basically programs you into thinking that. And then when we think about, police brutality, it really stems with that, of the programming of how they've been, how it's been displayed to them. And this is their subconscious, because I think it's something that I really don't think it's, something that's intentional, but subconsciously it's been programmed in their mind already that they're quick to pull the trigger. They're quick to react, again, because it's based on their programming, especially when you have this on television, all the time in the news. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, it definitely, it even adds more of a burden, because now not only you are labeled a term that historically, before it was even applied to you, it had a negative connotation. Now you're basically displaying those adjectives by your behavior. And this is the thing that was done purposely. Okay, this is not, you know, accidental. And it's something that I always wanted to really, you know what I'm saying, like really understand why. And now that I really dissect this and go really and really dive into this and start really to really critically think, I understand why there's so much, police brutality when it comes to, black people, as they label, people like that from that complexion, although it has nothing to do with complexion, as I already stated. So, and when you think about color, right? My question too is that think about this too. It's kind of like, you start to really wonder more. Black has no nationality, as I already stated. So my question is, how come Asian people don't call themselves yellow? If you go up to an Asian person, and you ask them, how do you identify yourself? Are you yellow? They're gonna give you like the, what are you talking about? More than likely they're gonna identify themselves as either they're Chinese American, Japanese American, or descendants, from South Korea or so forth, but they're not gonna reply and say I'm yellow, and when you think about the history of even with the Chinese, at one point they were prevented from migrating to the United States. It was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. And they were really trying to label them yellow. But the difference was that Chinese people didn't accept that term. They didn't accept themselves to be called yellow. They rejected that. Okay? And this is why, we don't really refer people that, are Asian as yellow people. Although they were trying to use that label to really identify Asian people. So, this is something that I always have to say. When you definitely give yourself a label with a color, it's like you're taking away your personhood away from you. You're not giving yourself a true identity. And it really makes it look like you're a thing. And that's what the Europeans wanted to do. Okay, they wanted to really label you as a thing, not as a person, a human. So this is why, I really rather identify myself as a person that, comes from an African ancestry, opposed to calling myself a color. And, when you start to really, again, start to really think about this, the more and more you realize, as far as how this was done strategically to really devalue people of Africa, and how the Europeans use that to really empower themselves to look more superior based on calling themselves white, because as we saw in the clip in the movie, they don't want to call themselves pink, because again, that word is not as powerful as being calling yourself white. So this is very important to understand, very important. So I'll say, we have to break away from this. You have to really, educate ourselves on this level of thinking. It's imperative that we become more conscious of this phenomenon, so we could start to unravel our own bias, and in most cases our subconscious bias, because of this. And I mean, as I always say, if you don't know your history, it's bound to repeat itself. So, that's really my brief take. I would definitely want to elaborate this more with a special guest I'm going to definitely have on. So, from this time forward, I am no longer going to use that term, as far as like, using that term that was a part of our, a part of the oppressor's history, to use that to devalue my ancestors. So, I'm gonna leave it like that. By the way, a book I want to recommend is a book called, I have it here actually, Othello's Children in the New World, Morris History and Identity in the African American Experience. One hell of a book, and it definitely, changed my perspective of how I look at, of labeling, especially calling yourself black, calling someone white. and the impact it has psychologically, you know, where you may not know this, but subconsciously it has a big impact. So yeah, so I'm gonna leave it like that. I mean, I'm gonna end it off with a final thought, and my final thought with this quick segment is, you know, humans are not made by race. Okay, humans are made by culture. So no matter what, you know, background you have, it's really a, you know, based on your culture. So you're not black, you're not Negro, you're not colored. You are a spiritual being living a human experience. Because at the end of the day, we are all one. I am DJ John Tavall, signing off. Peace out.